Hey guys, Alicia Wright with EXP.
Gene Agustin with the Lending Collective.
Friends, we are in a different location
Yes.
today. We decided to go with Gene's backyard. Yay! We were gonna go to the pool and have some margaritas, but we decided to keep it a little.
I'm not ready for that yet.
I know, I know. My summer body never came.
My
so.
beach body's not here. Next year, maybe. Next year.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, today we're going to be talking about something huge. So, if you were thinking about selling your house, these are a list of questions that I think you need to consider. And I've brought my friend Alicia here as a rockstar agent, and she's going to drop some serious knowledge on things you can do or things you should consider, think about before you decide to sell your house.
Yep. That's really, we're here. That's the big part of why we're here, to answer that question. Should you buy a house or sell a house in 2026?
Yeah.
And we have had an interesting market.
Insane.
Yes.
So, Alicia, everyone's noticing this right now. One home hits the market and it's under contract in a week.
Yeah.
And then there are other homes where it'll sit on the market for 2 or 3 months.
Right.
What's happening? Do sellers have that much control?
Right. It's hard. Nobody wants to hear this, but pricing is one of the biggest factors. Like, we have to price so that a buyer is going to be interested.
Yeah.
We are not in a seller's market. We're in a mixed bag kind of market where some areas you do see houses sell quickly, and others the houses are sitting 30, 60, 90 days. So I think the one of the biggest differentiating factors is pricing, and pricing is wrapped into a few different things. We have condition, like we price based on we price based on so many different factors and variables, but it is what we have to focus on in the end, because a buyer is only willing to pay so much.
Yeah.
And
It's what we call comparables or comps, right?
Yes.
So what are the recent sales in your neighborhood that can support the valuation of your house? Now, that actually leads into my second question. So sellers typically price based on what they need. I've done that, right? Like, I've sold a bunch of homes, and I'm like, this is what I want, darn it, and this is what I'm going to list it for.
Right.
And how come sometimes that's not the best strategy or best case?
Right. I think it's because we have to actually consider what a buyer is willing to pay. Like, my guy looks at me and loves me for every angle, right? But other people might not. It's like that, you know what I mean? You have your house, you think it's precious. It is precious, and you think you've put in so much work, and you know what you did in the garden, and you know what you did in the backyard, and you know what you did in the kitchen, and like, you've improved your property and you've made memories there. But the reality is, what is a buyer willing to pay? Comps equal what a buyer has paid for other houses in your neighborhood.
That's like that meme, right? Like, a seller, my house is worth $1 million. Appraiser, it's worth 800. A lender, it's worth 5 or 6. That always cracks me up because and it could be maybe if the comps can't support what you need, then maybe it's not the right time to sell. Right.
Exactly.
That could be it too.
That's part of why we're helping you explore in this question.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't the right time to sell, but that's something we'll have to, figure out.
All right, I'm gonna throw you off here. Okay. So we call this buying the listing, right?
Yes.
And I'm experiencing this a lot with newer agents. And now I'll explain why this bothers me. Right? Is what does buying the listing mean?
It means I am going to, as you're interviewing agents, I'm going to tickle your ear and tell you everything you want to know, and tell you you absolutely you can get $950,000.
Yeah.
And it's like just to get the listing, but that does you absolutely no favors.
Yeah.
And it does me, maybe a little bit of a favor in that I have a listing now. But if it doesn't sell, then I have an unhappy client.
Yeah.
You're hiring a professional to be honest with you, and if you want someone to just tell you what you want to hear, you could try selling it yourself. But it's not comfortable to say to someone, "Hey, I know you think your house is worth $950, but it's really worth $850."
Yeah.
Nobody likes to do that. It's not fun.
Yeah.
So, I have a presentation where I'm like, "Here's the comps. Here are the
numbers.
Here are the numbers."
Yeah.
Do a little exercise. Pretend that you are a buyer in your own neighborhood.
Love that.
And if your realtor isn't doing that, do a little search yourself on Zillow or wherever you like to search and say, hey, I'm a buyer with 800,000 or 950 or whatever your price range is. And then look around like you have that in your pocket and pick the top 3 houses.
Yeah.
And then objectively compare them to yours.
Yeah. That's the hard part. Objectively.
It is. It's really hard. And that's when I'm like, hey, we can't have all these plugins inside here because it smells like so much potpourri. People are gonna think there's dog pee. Like there's stuff we have to say that isn't popular, and y'all don't like it to hear it. But it's true. You know, we have to be like, it's not doing you any service if I try to buy the listing just to make myself look better, you know, because in the end, you know, we've built a longevity of business here over decades and decades of business. Yeah. That, you know, we're here for the long haul. We're not just here to grab a listing and, you know, grab a quick sale. You know, we're wanting to build a clientele of people who trust us in this way. So. Yeah,
and how that affects me on the loan side is a lot of times I work primarily with listing agents, and because their sellers are buyers today, right? And we, you know, when I'm working with the seller and getting them approved for the loan on the house that they're trying to buy, we get all our ducks in a row. And the problem with the listing agent that buys the listing is it sets an unrealistic expectation.
Absolutely.
And it's just a domino effect.
Well,
you know?
I mean, how sad is it? You think you're going to get 950 because someone was like, oh yeah, sure, get 950.
Yeah.
And then you're planning to move up to, you know, 1.8. And now you have 200,000
less,
150,000 less, 100,000 less.
It affects what you're trying to buy now. It is just a horrible domino effect.
Right.
And
so what I would say is, don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. If your realtor is saying, hey, the range is this to this, you know, or if it, you know, and there's obviously other things that go into the pricing. You know, there's other factors. It's not just that. You're not going to leave money on the table if you price it on the lower end, because that's when other buyers see the value. But when you're out buying, aren't you looking all the time? You get the emails, you're looking at Zillow, Redfin, wherever your realtor's sending you things. You're looking because you're excited about that next move. Buyers are doing the same thing, and in their mind, they're collecting this data. They're running a program that's like, which one's the best? Which one is the nicest? Which one is the best I can get for my budget? Yeah. So if you're like, well, I think I could get 950. That strategy is so difficult. It's difficult for you, and it's difficult for everyone else involved. And it just ends up being a heartbreak for everyone.
I think the key thing you said is, as a seller, you got to put yourself in the buyer's shoes.
You really
You got to put yourself, objectively put yourself in the buyer's eyes, and, you know, hire a professional who's going to be not a yes person, someone who's going to tell you something that you might not necessarily want to hear, but hopefully is guiding you or steering you in the right direction. So that leads me to my next question. So are there times where a seller should actually try to calculate what a buyer's monthly payment would be if on a house that, you know, if I was selling my home?
I think it's a good exercise because you know, houses don't sell. Like, pricing isn't about your expectation. It is about what a buyer is willing to pay. And right now, just because you may have a $1,500 or a $2,000 a month payment on your house that's you know, $800 or $850 now, valued at $850 or whatever.
Property tax is higher.
Yes. Yeah. But you know, if you have like a lower payment, like the buyers today, you know, if someone's putting a 20% down, or let's say they're putting a 10% down on an $850,000 or $900,000 house, the payment is going to be like 2 to 3 times what you're paying. Yeah. So, you know, it's not that buyers are trying to be so difficult, or they're not trying to just wheel and deal you and scam you out of all your equity. They're just really struggling with affordability. Yeah. It's really hard for a buyer to, you know, make that. You have to, I think, remember what it was like when you bought your first home. Yeah. Wasn't it a sacrifice? Everybody feels that level of sacrifice. And, you know, for a buyer, it's a big part of your paycheck to make that monthly payment. Yeah.
So it's a good exercise to at least be aware of what a potential buyer will be paying on your home.
Right.
Again, I think that's just a good exercise to consider. So if a buyer's making a bigger financial commitment, how do we catch these picky buyers before they move on to the next property?
Right. We all are hearing how buyers are just so picky right now. And it's not like, I think that the answer to my last question leads into this answer.
Yeah.
And that is, they're not like, picky toddlers that don't want to eat their vegetables. Like, they are actually struggling in real time with affordability.
Because rates are up.
Rates are up, yep. When you're making, a $5,000 or $6,000 a month mortgage payment, most people don't have a lot of extra money to put in new flooring right away. They can't fix the HVAC that you have deferred maintenance on and is now 20 years old. To get top dollar means that you have had to maintenance your property along the way.
Yeah.
And if you didn't do it, like, no shame, we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
But it will impact the price you get.
Yeah.
Buyers are not just being picky and difficult for, like I said, to
be mean.
scam you out of, they're not trying to wheel and deal you. They're just trying to get into home ownership, or maybe they're move-up buyers that are buying your home. They sold their smaller.
Or first-time buyers.
Either way, first-time buyers or move-up buyers, either way, they're coming in with a fixed amount that they can put down.
Yeah.
And the payment is big. It's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, property tax is going to be higher. And not only that, I mean, homeowners insurance is through the roof right now, too. So just everything is more expensive.
Right.
I think buyers are just starting to tighten up a bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a fun question. What if a house has real problems, like it backs up to a busy road, or we're in Rockland, so you can sometimes hear the train, which we're far enough.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear,
Yeah.
but I can imagine living. I know homes that are right on the track.
Yep.
What happens when you come across a listing that is in that situation?
Right. Well, you have to understand that as buyers are looking around, they're looking at all the properties in your neighborhood, and if you're talking about just straight up value for where you are in your actual neighborhood, it's kind of known that the centers of the neighborhood have a little bit more value. When builders sell
Build
them
out.
initially and build out, they start with the middle, and those are kind of the more desirable lots, and then they build out, and then we have some that back to a road. We have some that are maybe they're next to a gas station, or maybe they're right next to this you can't control. Maybe they're right next to a daycare. There's some things that sellers, you just can't control about exactly, where your property is, but buyers are noticing it. And if you are a buyer, are you going to pick a house that is, right next to the road, or are you going to pick one where it's quiet in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And I think we can make a case for buyers who want to be on the edge of the neighborhood. You want to be close to the freeway, you work downtown. I can make all those cases too, but that is probably fewer than the majority.
And realistically, right? So if I have a house that's in a desirable location that, let's just say it's sold for $850, and let's say it's a 3-bedroom 2-bath, and I'm selling a house, same neighborhood, but now my house backs up to railroad tracks, still 3-bedroom 2-bath. Let's just say for like.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that $850 home is going to be a comp for me. I can't necessarily price my home for $850 because we have to take into consideration that it's not in location is legit, right?
It is. It really
so
is.
that does have an impact on what we should be coming in and listing the house for. Is that correct?
It is. And I think that, a buyer is going to be willing to pay more for what they would call a premium spot in the neighborhood versus an exterior spot. And, like I said, the daycare example, maybe many people wouldn't care about that. Maybe whatever, it's fine. But some people, do care about that. And you as a seller can't control whether your neighbor has a daycare with a ton of kids running around. So, I have a ton of kids. Don't you want to move next to me? Maybe not.
We moved in our neighborhood 20 plus years ago because there were a ton of kids in there. I mean, this is why we left the Bay Area. I wanted to live in a neighborhood that reminded me of how I grew up.
Yes, I like it too. Not, it's not every buyer.
Unless you hate kids.
No.
Come on. No, I can't imagine. It's fun to see.
I have 5 kids, so I'm not talking down on kids.
I think a healthy neighborhood, it's like a real community.
Yes.
Where you see neighbors hanging out and you see kids playing. I love that. And that's.
It is part of what makes the generations gel together.
Yeah, 100%. 100. All right. Okay, what improvements actually remove objections instead of just spending money?
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Good one. It's kind of along the lines of like the maintenance question. And again, if you haven't done it, no shame. I'll help you. We'll figure it out. You know, your realtor should be helping you to figure out if your HVAC is 20 years old and your roof is 20 years old, you know, you're going to have to price accordingly, because that's about $40,000 or so for a buyer to pick up the tab on. So you know, or if you lease the solar, you know, that's another one where it's like, okay, fine, but you will have to, you know, pass on that to
Cost.
to the buyer. You know, there's pricing structure will have to take those things into consideration. And then I would say, if you're getting your house ready, there are some things that you can do that will make your house look instantly better. New flooring is huge. People want to live in a clean house. People want to see, you know, buyers want to see the floors look nice, the baseboards look nice. Like, everybody's looking around.
Fresh coat of paint.
Fresh coat of paint.
Yeah.
I mean, those things don't cost entirely that much. I have good sources for flooring.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put in expensive flooring. Definitely do not put in the cheapest flooring, because it will look like an apartment.
Yeah.
You know, you want to put in the middle of the road kind of flooring if you're going to redo it immediately. And there are some decently priced, nice looking flooring that you can choose that people will, you know, so if you put in the cheapest flooring, it doesn't matter whether it's clean or dirty in that way, because a buyer coming in,
Oh, they can tell right away.
yeah, it depends.
Yeah.
If you're in the $500,000 to $600,000 price range, no problem. If you're in the $8-9 million plus price range, you know, if you put in the cheapest flooring, a buyer is going to come in and see that as a redo.
Yeah.
They're going to just be like, oh, this is a remodel.
It's funny. We've done, you know, a bunch of open houses together, and we've done like $1 million open houses, like brand new.
Yeah.
Brand new, not brand new, but you were.
Yeah.
But the floors were trash.
Yeah.
Paint, like it just was. The owners lived in it really hard.
Right.
And then we've been in older homes, 30, 40 years old, where they put fresh coat of paint, new floors, maybe clean up the cabinets, and I'm like, dude, this house is dope. Like,
Right.
So.
Right.
I think having some, like, you don't have to go crazy.
The pride of ownership, when you do
That carries on to the buyer.
It translates
Yeah,
to the buyer.
I love that.
Yeah. So if you consider that, like when you're looking to buy your next home, you want to know that the person has done their due diligence.
Yeah.
They've repaired things that need to be fixed, and hey, we're all busy people.
And that you cared about your house.
We're all busy people,
Yeah.
and I get like things you're getting busy and you don't get to do everything you wanted to do. So, you know, a good strategy, a good realtor will help you figure out what things you need to do. The things that are not necessarily good to do is to spend, you know, $50,000 on a new kitchen.
Oh my
You know,
God.
$20,000 on a brand new bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're spending $50,000 to $100,000, I mean, I guess if you're in the, you know, $2+ million range, fine.
Yeah.
But like if you're under that, like it is not going to net you more money. Your house will sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But not your net won't be much different.
This one really like hits me hard because I've got friends who they were trying to sell a house in the Bay Area, and the realtor that they were talking to advised for them to do this remodel. And the house was already beautiful, but they wanted them to remodel the kitchen. And in the Bay Area, majority of the time, someone's going to buy. They're just buying the dirt.
Right.
That's where the value is.
Yeah.
And a new buyer is going to come in and probably demo it and build something new. So my clients spend a ton of money redoing their kitchen. And mind you, we already had a house that we had located, and they were relocating from the Bay to Placer County. And they were in a new build, phase 1. By the time they finished the remodel of their house, phase 2 had moved in. The home in Rockland appreciated $500,000. So they lost $500,000 in equity
by taking all this time to remodel their
on
kitchen.
something that they didn't have to do. It
Right.
wasn't gonna, like if you spend $50,000 in a remodel, it doesn't mean you're gonna make $50,000 or $100,000 more.
No.
So sometimes like less is more.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yes, and someone who has experience will be able to guide you, like in terms of what the cost is going to be. You know, I will on my listing sometimes bring in contractors, get some quotes and stuff like that, and then, you know, we'll run the numbers. If spending $50,000 is going to make you $100,000 more, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
But if $50,000 is going to make you the same amount of money, then there's no sense in doing it. Like, there's no point in driving your price up higher. You know, let's say you get $850 now, but you spent $50,000, you still net $800,000, and you took a lot of time and energy. Who knows what a pain in the butt it is to remodel your kitchen or your bathrooms, right? Yeah.
So keep it simple.
Yes.
Don't go too crazy.
Well, and a person with experience should be able to help you through this. Yeah.
That's the question. That's the hard part. The person you're talking to have experience. All right. If a buyer sees an old roof or a tired HVAC, like how do you work around that?
Yeah, like I said, they will have to, you know, they don't want to have to spend $45,000 or $55,000, $60,000 depending on your roof, you know, out the door.
So you have to price accordingly.
Yeah, you price accordingly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've had a few instances. I've had a couple of deals fall out this month because the roofs were like in the end of their lifespan.
Yep.
And the sellers would not budge.
Let's take it to another place. I mean, we're talking about higher end.
Yeah.
Let's take it to let's say your house has a lot of dry rot.
Oh, okay.
You know, let's say you got the pest inspection.
Yeah.
Or let's say you did not get. We'll lead into this in a bit. Do you get pre-inspections? You can ask me that in a minute. But if you have a buyer, you didn't get pre-inspections. They got a pest inspection, and you have $10,000 to $15,000 worth of dry rot on your house.
Yeah.
If you know, that will be a negotiating point for the buyer on the price. Okay, but let's say your buyer is an FHA buyer.
Yeah.
And tell us about FHA appraisal?
I mean, FHA conventional. If the dry rot is like visible, appraiser's going to call it, and
on FHA
could be conventional too. Like I've had not so much, but if it's a good appraiser, like I've had a case where the whole siding. Like I'm surprised. Like you could probably stick your finger through it. Appraiser may call it out, right? Yep. And so I always tell my clients or my agents, is the house livable? And I always
FHA criteria is they have to have working heat.
Yep.
They have to have working.
If there's dry rot, you better sand it down and repaint over it
because on how bad it is. Because your house could fall out of escrow, and then however many days, if they went the full 17-day inspection period, and then they were like, okay, now give us $15,000, $20,000.
Yeah.
And if it's an FHA loan, let's say, that has to be done before the close.
Yeah.
So who's going to do that work?
Yeah.
Is the buyer going to invest?
Yeah,
is the buyer going to pay $10,000 to $15,000? Let's say $5,000. Will the buyer pay $5,000 on a house they don't own just to get the dry rot handled so they can close?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well,
I would advise not.
Okay, so this is going to lead into my next question. I love this topic. So if I were selling my home, right, would you advise that we order all the inspections ahead of time?
Yeah, I always advise that.
Yeah.
I always advise that. I would get a home, roof, pest, maybe sewer inspection.
Yeah.
If you're in the hills, well and septic inspection. We want to remove buyers' ability to try to negotiate this stuff later on in the contract because if the inspection is 17 days, the buyer gets all their inspections, and then you have your days on the market are ticking. Yeah. Every day, every week you're on the market, including the escrow period. Now you have 17 days more days on the market. The buyer has kind of got you in a hard place. Yeah,
like why I'm hiring you as a negotiator for me, right? Why would we go into a war room without having all the pieces or any information? Why would we let a buyer come in and order all these inspections, have more data, so now they can we don't have any ammunition to negotiate with, right? So having these reports ahead of time,
it's game theory.
You can start strategizing.
Right, it's game theory. Who knows? Let's say we're having a tiff, an argument, and I'm like, hey, Gene, go first.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
No,
because then I could just undermine your argument, right?
It blows my mind how many listing agents don't recommend ordering.
I will say, it blows my mind how many sellers don't listen to their agent.
That's true too.
You know,
Yeah,
too.
that's fair.
And that's why I'm saying you gotta be collaborative with your agent.
If you want to sell, you gotta listen to your agent.
If you pick an agent and God forbid they're new and don't have any experience, that you know more than them because you've bought and sold houses before, you're making a mistake. Okay, you gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing, and if you trust that person with your biggest asset or one of your biggest assets, then know that we don't make any extra money by getting you inspections up front. It's a lot more work on us to coordinate all that. So it's not benefiting us as a realtor to get the inspections up front. It benefits you because we're helping you make the most on your house. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is going to be my next question. That kind of leads into strategy, but we really talked on that, right? So, and we're getting a little long, so I'm sorry, guys. So one last question.
Yeah.
So what's one tiny decision you've seen quietly win or lose a whole deal?
I would say thinking you know more than your agent does.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and if you do, I would say
you got to get
a
new agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right,
Anyhow, I hope you found this information helpful.
Yes.
Give us a like, share, please subscribe.
Follow us for our next edition. We do this every week.
Yep. I hope you guys had fun with us. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.